Нитро для удара.
Передаю.
Нитро, я удар.
Алло,
Нитро, я удар. Слушаю тебя.
удар я Нитро. 6-й полк почти потерял.
Что?
Нитро.
Алло, Нитро для удара.
Передаю.
Нитро, я удар.
Алло,
Нитро, я удар. Слушаю тебя.
удар я Нитро. 6-й полк почти потерял.
Что?
6-й полк пока не могу доложить, пока собираю. Очень много потерь. Ждали. Голова колонны попала в засаду. Командир полка погиб. По остальным разбираюсь.
Сейчас как разберешься, всех соберешь, мне доложишь. Как понял?
Оттуда били
Уважаемые
артиллерию,
коллеги, добрый
танки.
день.
С беспилотника, так я понял, байрактары
С
летают.
текущими событиями.
Остальным сейчас потерям
Но начать
разбираюсь.
я хотел бы именно с этого и
Our people, our Ukrainians, do not retreat, do not give up, do not stop the resistance. They shout to the occupiers, go home.
обменяться какой-то информацией по текущим событиям. Да, Сергей Кружгедович, пожалуйста.
Уважаемый Владимир Владимирович, у нас все идет по плану.
Our people, our Ukrainians, do not retreat, do not give up, do not stop the resistance. They shout to the occupiers, go home.
Я залишаюсь тут, залишаюсь у Києві, на Банковій, не ховаючись і нікого не боюсь, стільки, скільки потрібно, щоб перемогти у цій нашій вітчизняній війні. Пішов сніг. Ось така весна. Ну, яка війна, така й весна. Сувора. Але все одно нормально. Всіх переможемо.
Putin now fears what the Russian public might now do, especially if they know the truth about his war.
у цій нашій вітчизні.
А як він виглядає? Зривати сталкер просто по-другому схоже. Бонуси такі, так? Бачиш? Ага.
Підбили, до речі, подарунками від її величності британської королеви, так що передавайте нам такої движухи більше і буде отаких танків підбитих набагато більше. Люди також просять, але поки що у нас немає можливості роздати кожному українцю по лwow. А хотілося б.
Це робить? Ой, як пизда.
Що це?
Осколочно-фугасний снаряд для танка. Зміщайся в колію, щоб вони не ныряли. Ага.
Канат
Абсолютно согласен.
Канат де? Давайте міряти канат.
Шла колонна. Дождались. Отработали. Результати. Всіх треба, блін. Слава Україні. Стовни отработали. О, ё-моё, домкрат.
Нитро.
Алло, Нитро для удара.
Передаю.
Нитро, я удар.
Алло,
Нитро, я удар. Слушаю тебя.
удар я Нитро. 6-й полк почти потерял.
Что?
6-й полк пока не могу доложить, пока собираю. Очень много потерь. Ждали. Голова колонны попала в засаду. Командир полка погиб. По остальным разбираюсь.
Сейчас как разберешься, всех соберешь, мне доложишь, как понял.
Оттуда били артиллерия, танки. С беспилотника, так я понял, Байрактар летает. Остальным сейчас потерям разбираюсь.
Our people, our Ukrainians, do not retreat, do not give up, do not stop the resistance. They shout to the occupiers, go home.
Я залишаюсь тут, залишаюсь у Києві, на Банковій, не ховаючись і нікого не боюсь, стільки, скільки потрібно, щоб перемогти у цій нашій вітчизняній війні. Пішов сніг. Ось така весна. Ну, яка війна, така й весна. Сувора. Але все буде нормально. Всіх переможемо.
It was Putin's idea to invade Ukraine, and it was his fantasy that Ukrainians would, welcome the Russian invaders as liberators. And the whole thing's a classic failure of a dictator, just like Hitler when he decided to invade Russia. Suddenly his crack units are getting wiped out. Who tipped off the Ukrainians? It seems that people very senior in Putin's military or intelligence may actually be leaking against him. And Putin, a former KGB spy, would know that too. So he's getting desperate.
А як він виглядає? Взривати? Сталкер как-то по-другому похоже. Вон сюди. Вот, бачиш? Да.
Підбили, до речі, подарунками від її величності британської королеви, так що передавайте нам такої движухи більше, і буде отаких танків підбитих набагато більше. Люди також просять, але поки що в нас немає можливості роздати кожному українцю по лwow. А хотілося б.
Це робить? Ой, як пизда. Що це? Осколочно-фугасний снаряд для танка. Зміщайся, колію, щоб ми не ныряли. Ага.
Канат
Абсолютно согласен.
Канат де? Давайте міряти канат.
Шла колонна. Дождались. Отработали. Результаты. Всех треба, блин. Слава Украине. Стовны отработали. О, ё-моё, домкрат.
Hey, everybody! Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, in the book, you write that you met Zelensky when he was a candidate. What were your first impressions?
Well, I was expecting a funny guy to walk into the room because he's a comedian, and he was very funny, but the point he wanted to make with me was that he was a businessman. He had established a media conglomerate, multi-million-dollar enterprise, all based on his own talent and hard work, and he had executive skills. Soon thereafter, he announced that he would be running for the presidency, and it was clear that the Ukrainian people were looking for something different. They wanted to keep on going, in their democracy.
What was the appeal of a comedian? How bad were things in the political landscape there that they went, well, let's give the clown a try?
Well, that's, interestingly, there are similarities here with the United States, because the political establishment in Ukraine never believed and couldn't believe that Zelensky was actually going to win. To outsiders, it was very clear what was going to happen. Kind of sounds familiar, right? So I think that the Ukrainian people wanted to keep on going. They wanted to, they had the revolution of dignity, which means rule of law, everybody is treated equally. In 2014, they wanted reforms to continue. They wanted to look west. They wanted to have a liberal democracy so that they would have opportunities for their children and there wouldn't be corruption in the country. And while there were reforms, they never moved forward in a straight line. And so people got, restless and they were looking for the next candidate. And Zelensky had this TV show called A Servant of the People. And he played a teacher who all of a sudden, through an accident of fate, became president. And then life imitated art, and he became the president of Ukraine. And he was the protest candidate. He ran on a simple platform of, we're going to end corruption, and we're going to bring peace to Ukraine. Very simple, very appealing messages.
I noticed you've got a bracelet here, rather unusual bracelet there.
It is, yeah.
Can I, if you don't want to say it, I just noticed what it says.
Yeah.
Would you like to say what it says?
I'm going to let you say that because I'm the diplomat.
Well, where did you get this bracelet?
So this is a made in Ukraine bracelet, and it says...
You got this in Ukraine?
I got it in Ukraine.
What year did you buy this?
I think in 2017, but I bulk ordered them, and I gave them to all visitors, including our Congress people.
It says, you Putin. Indeed. That's lovely.
And it's for you.
Sorry, what?
This one's for you.
I'll take it. Thank you. Before we go, are there any Ukrainian sayings or quotes that inspire you? Because I know it has a long history of art and poetry and literature.
It does. It has a long and proud and beautiful culture. And so, when people ask me, how is it that the Ukrainian people are resisting like this? I remind them about Taras Shevchenko, who was the poet laureate in the 1800s and continues to be the country's most favorite poet. And his most famous line is, fight on and you will prevail. And that's what Ukrainian children are brought up on.
Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for this. The book, Lessons from the Edge, is available this Tuesday. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, everybody. When we come back, I give Martha Stewart the Colbert Questionnaire. Stick around.
Russian forces are surging closer to Ukraine's capital tonight, just kilometres out from Kyiv, but under fierce fight back from a nation vowing to never surrender.
Ukraine says it's holding back the tide, but the human suffering is deepening. Millions desperate for food, fuel, and in many cities, any sign of a safe way to run.
A city under relentless siege. Mariupol burning, bombed for another day. A boy wounded and trapped. No mercy for rescue teams. A day after the horrifying missile attack on a maternity hospital that killed at least 3 people, one of them a 6-year-old child. But Russia claims it was all staged. Its foreign minister says women and children had long been evacuated. It was being used as an army barracks. And while the world saw images of misery filmed by independent journalists, Russia called claims of civilian casualties nothing more than a pathetic outcry. But in a city that just 2 weeks ago was thriving, its people are being interred in mass graves, and the living are frozen in fear. As Russia surges closer to the capital, a column of tanks just 16 kilometres outside Kyiv under attack. Hit by rockets from Turkish-supplied Bayraktar drones, a weapon now so famous Ukraine's made its own hero song. Bayraktar, Bayraktar. Military leaders say they're holding back the enemy. But ahead of those tanks, Russian soldiers are on reconnaissance.
You can hear down there, that's just a couple of kilometres away. That's small arms fire, some sort of machine gun. That's an exchange of gunfire. Now, this is only a couple of kilometres away from the northern suburbs of Kyiv, the capital. A hospital just here, gunfire over there.
We put the drone up to find them. Ukraine soldiers were keen to see as well. The patrol had melted into the landscape, but across the horizon, Russia's trail of destruction is clear to see. And it's fueling a metropolitan migration.
In the 2 weeks since the Russians first rolled over Ukraine's borders, this city, the capital Kyiv, has emptied of residents. The mayor saying today that of the 4 million strong population, half, 2 million people, have now fled.
But for those in cities like Mariupol, there's no safe way out. This was the city's emergency services headquarters, meaning saving people just got harder.
Ukraine will never, never be a victory for Putin.
But the suffering has no end in sight.
Chris Reason is live in Kiev. Chris, it's getting increasingly desperate for people there.
Ange, that town of Mariupol we saw in that report has no power, no water, no gas, no food. It has no internet. It has no connection with the outside world, no heating. It is now here in Kyiv -7 today, and that's without the wind factor. The people there are desperate. The ICRC, the International Red Cross, is telling us that they have stripped every shop bare of food. They've been looting madly, breaking into each other's cars to steal the petrol from petrol tanks, and they also report that people are attacking each other for food now. It is a complete breakdown in there. People are desperate to get out. Russia says just this morning it's going to allow those humanitarian corridors to open up at 9 o'clock every day. The people, the locals, say that is just laughable. It clearly hasn't worked for Mariupol. They have promised these corridors so many times and rarely delivered.
Chris Reason, thank you.
Andrei Kozyrev was Russian foreign minister from 1991 to 1996 under President Yeltsin, the first person to serve in that role in that post-Soviet era. He's also been credited with developing Russia's foreign policy in that period, as we were just discussing tonight, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the wall. We should also note the current foreign minister, a name you've probably heard, Sergei Lavrov, served as his deputy. Kozyrev left the Russian government in 2000. That was the year Putin became president for the first time. And he has emerged as something of a critic of Putin and some of these measures. Mr. Minister, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
That statement you made, first reported by the New York Times, seems to combine the evidence that Russia's military is hitting problems with your insight or observation that those are exactly the kind of problems that may have been underreported internally to Putin. Can you expound on that a bit more and explain to us how you came to that view?
Well, it's any dictator or any authoritarian, they suffer from the same problem, that they surround themselves with good lickers, so to say, or yes men. And those yes men, they are afraid just to report. And I met with those circumstances when I was foreign minister, for instance, in Iraq, Saddam Hussein, or in many other places. And in the Soviet Union, it was like that. I served in the Soviet foreign ministry. I am a career diplomat. And that was exactly like that. Nobody reported the truth. So he probably believed that there is no Ukrainian nation and that he has overwhelming power, overwhelming army, which cannot be, because look at the situation in Russia and the Russian economy. Russian economy has been stagnated for the last 10 years, if not declining. And the corruption is overwhelming inside Russia. So how could the military be totally separate from that? There could not be a military like United States, in a corrupt state. So it's just nothing, not a rocket science to know that.
Yeah, you put it like that it's, you say not rocket science, a common phrase, that if everything else is in decline, why would the military be an exception? And if crony capitalism and oligarchs and cronyism is how part of the economy and the society runs, why would the military be exempt from that? I want to play a little bit of Putin. This was in an older interview. This is before the invasion but goes to the mindset that you may understand. This was with our own NBC colleague Keir Simmons, where he tries to make the argument that really he has to respond to NATO, that Russia is constantly on defense, as he puts it. Take a look.
What was the point of expanding NATO to the east and bringing this infrastructure to our borders? And all of this before saying that we're the ones who have been acting aggressively? Why? On what basis? Did Russia, after the USSR collapsed, present any threat to the United States or European countries? We voluntarily withdrew our troops from Eastern Europe. And what did we get in response? We got in response infrastructure next to our borders. And now you're saying that we're threatening to somebody.
You're an expert at getting to the root of things, not taking it all at face value. Can you share with us your view from your time there? Does he in any way believe some of this stuff because he's closed off, as you described? Or when you get to these international issues, is it still his version of propaganda, baiting, what in America they sometimes call trolling, and constantly making it out as if he must respond because of what the West is doing?
It's both. It's not or, but it's one and the other. It's his conviction, but it's conviction of convenience because he needs a foreign enemy to justify in some way this disastrous economy in Russia, which is one of the richest countries. If you look at the mineral resources, oil, gas, gold, everything. And the population is educated and able to do complex jobs. So this disastrous results in Russian underdevelopment. That's something which needs an excuse. And that excuse they find in NATO. NATO never threatened a new Russia. NATO countries are eligible for Russian oligarchs and for Russian successful people, people who have some means to go. That's where they go. They don't go to Iran. They don't go to China. Right. Even they go to America, to France, to NATO countries. So it's all a wrong conviction of convenience, and it's, of course, propaganda. And that makes a vicious circle. You know, propaganda comes to him back in reports of his acolytes, and then they reproduce it again as propaganda. And he is in a echo chamber. But what I want to say also that I don't know why everybody is so fixated on Putin. I mean, it's like a spoiled child, or today he is in good mood, tomorrow he is in bad mood, and what is his next caprice is, forget it. It's just politics. It's just intergovernment politics. And if
Goedemorgen allemaal, ik zal heel even in het Nederlands. Good morning all. I will continue in Dutch for a very short while, a few sentences. Dit kanaal heet dus, ik zie hem nu niet voor me, Russia War Ukraine geloof ik, of andersom. Dit is een ander kanaal dat ik heb opgezet, het is internationaal, dus Engels en qua tags en index en noem maar op, dat soort dingen. Dus jullie waren net op mijn privé kanaal. Om het zo maar te noemen, mijn eerste profiel. Dit is dan een ander kanaal, speciaal rond de graanprijs in Nederland. En andere dingen gerelateerd aan de oorlog Rusland-Oekraïne. NATO, net hoe het zich ontwikkelt. So, welcome viewers that are only English capable outside of your own language. Don't be shy, please type, you're welcome here. The channel is international and the language in the chat is also English. Sometimes you may hear a few Dutch words, but that's just it. Most is English.
it's okay that there is a response, but don't hesitate to make more responses. He does not hesitate to punch Ukraine or to attack NATO verbally or whatever. So the same is on the other side. It's just ridiculous that everybody is looking, what if he will be offended, or what if he will be nervous?
Well, you're speaking to the impact he has, and you mentioned the propaganda. I've got a little bit of time left, but you say the propaganda can be a vicious loop for them. Was it not Bakunin? Was it not Bakunin who said, don't get high on your own supply? Or maybe somebody else, but that's how we've put it in the United States. My question to you before I lose you in 30 seconds is there anyone inside the Russian government who can even give him the bad news? I'm not talking about overthrowing him, but give him bad news to course correct, or that's, in your view, out of line, not going to happen?
That is less possible than overthrow him. That's a Russian tradition. They fear to tell the boss the truth, but one day they might come with a weapon and escort him either to the grave or to retirement, like happened even in the Soviet Union. So it's rather they will escort him out than tell him the truth. That's a tradition.
Well, thank you for enlightening us on some of the traditions. The former Russian foreign minister and recent Putin critic, Andrei Kozyrov. Thank you, sir.
Well, let's speak now to Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, former head of the British Army's Chemical Weapons Unit. Hamish, always good to have you on the channel. Before we delve into what may well happen in Ukraine, for those who are not as au fait with the rules as you, what are the rules that govern whether or not a country can use chemical or biological weapons?
Well, number one, you can't. Chemical and biological weapons have been illegal really since the time of the Geneva Convention was first conceived back in the 1920s. There are a number of other conventions like the Chemical Weapons Convention signed in 1996 by most countries around the world, including Russia, that outlaws the use of chemical weapons. Biological weapons is a slightly different area. There is the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention, which outlaws them. But the basic premise that these are absolutely horrendous weapons, indiscriminate, mainly affect civilians, because of course soldiers tend to have gas masks and other protections, so they are illegal and horrendous under every law that one can conceive.
What is their utility then for someone like Vladimir Putin? Of course, there's certainly plenty of evidence that they have been deployed in his name before. What is their utility when it comes to a combat, the types of combat that we are seeing in Ukraine at the moment, which is an awful lot of street to street, house to house?
Well, I tend to agree with a lot of other commentators about what's been called the Russian playbook in Syria. I've seen the Russians at very close quarters over the last 6 years in Syria. And unfortunately, chemical weapons, what I've learned from my Syrian experience, chemical weapons are morbidly brilliant, and you'd use them all the time if you had no morals or scruples. Because in Syria, the towns and cities that were attacked, very similar to what we're seeing in Ukraine with Kyiv and other cities, once these cities are razed to the ground, the buildings have fallen down, it's almost impossible for attackers to get a foothold. And the Russians know all about this from Stalingrad in the Second World War. Over 1 million Red Army soldiers died defending Stalingrad. But what happened in Syria is after the 4-year conventional battle for Aleppo in northwest Syria, in December 2016, on 13 days, Assad dropped chlorine barrel bombs and broke that siege. Because the chlorine seeps underground, because it's heavier than air, and people hide in the rubble and underground. And the chlorine either kills them underground or forces them above ground to be shot or captured. And that also worked for Assad in a suburb called Ghouta and a suburb called Douma in 2017 and 2018. So they can be very, very successful. And unfortunately, of course, in August 2013, we had a massive sarin attack in Damascus, and the British government voted in September 2013 not to punish Assad, and the Americans followed suit. And I think that is really underwriting why we are here now, because that failure to punish Assad gave a green light to every dictator, despot, rogue state and terror group to use them. And I think Putin thinks he can use them with impunity.
Yeah, difficult to disagree with that part of your analysis, Hamish. So what then should we be doing? What then can we do, if anything? Is it just a case of waiting for the inevitable to happen and preparing the case for the ICC?
Well, it's really difficult. And I know that people are terribly concerned about us and NATO getting overcommitted in Ukraine. However, again, I'd point out the Syrian experience. When we eventually attacked Assad's key sites after the nerve agent attack in a place called Khan Shaykhun in April 2017, and then we attacked again in 2018 his sites, the chemical weapons stopped. Assad knew if he used them, he was going to get thumped. We must ensure that Putin understands the consequences of his actions, and perhaps enable even more the Ukrainian Air Force and military to be able to attack some of his strategic bits of equipment and strategic sites with more equipment. And I personally think we should be giving the Ukrainian army more aircraft so that they can win the battle in the skies.